I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the stack of unopened wedding invitations on my dresser. The soft glow of the evening sun casts a warm light across the room, but the warmth doesn't reach me. My name is Clara, 32, and I should be excited. After 4 years together, engaged for one, Evan and I were supposed to be counting down to June, imagining a perfect wedding, imagining a life together. Instead, I'm sitting here, feeling an unfamiliar weight in my chest. Our relationship has always been a mix of deep love and subtle friction, but lately, it feels like the friction is winning. I remember the first time the conversation about last names came up. Evan is traditional in some ways. He grew up in a household where family legacy mattered. His parents taught him that names carry identity, pride, history. I understand that, but I also understand myself. I want to keep my name, I said quietly, almost apologetically. Evan raised an eyebrow. Clara, why does it matter so much? It's just a name. No, I said. It's who I am. My career, my achievements, my family, it's all tied to this name. I'm not erasing it just to make a wedding more Instagrammable. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. I get that, but can't we compromise, hyphenate, use it professionally, and take my name legally? I shook my head. I don't want to compromise on something that defines me. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 weeks ago, at his friend Megan's engagement party, the subtle tension between us became a public spectacle. Evan laughed at my insistence on keeping my name in front of her friends. Clara's still stuck in the past, he joked. She wants to keep her foster name. I felt the flush of humiliation. Friends laughed, drinks were poured, and offhand comments flew like arrows. I sat quietly, letting the laughter wash over me, but inside, something cracked. On the drive home, I tried one last time. It was humiliating, I admitted. This isn't about tradition anymore. It's about being mocked in front of everyone. Evan glanced at me, his hands gripping the steering wheel. It's just jokes, Clara. You need to lighten up. No, Evan, I can't. You don't see it, but it matters to me, and it matters how you treated me. The night ended with silence. Not the kind of comfortable silence couples have, but a suffocating, unresolved silence that clung to me as I lay awake that night. I realized that if I wanted to preserve even a shred of dignity, I had to act. Not in anger, not in spite, but in self-respect. Monday morning, before Evan even stirred, I made the calls. Riverside Gardens, the florist, the photographer, the DJ, all canceled. $11,600 gone. 3 years of savings, all gone. But it wasn't about the money. It was about sending a message that my identity, my dignity, cannot be trivialized or used as entertainment. When Evan finally saw the empty reservation confirmation on my phone, his eyes widened in disbelief. What did you do? He asked, voice shaking. I respected your choice, I said softly. You don't want me to keep my name? Fine. I don't want the wedding. The choice is yours. Or mine. Actually mine. He sank onto the couch, speechless. I could see the gears turning in his mind, realizing for the first time that I wasn't going to bend. Not for jokes, not for social pressure, not for anyone. The days that followed were a mix of silent treatments, confrontations, and passive-aggressive messages. Friends and family started chiming in, each with their version of what Clara should do. Evan's sister called, his mother texted, his friends whispered behind my back. But I didn't flinch. I held my ground because I finally understood that love isn't about submission. It's about respect, equality, and the courage to protect yourself from public humiliation. Even now, sitting here, the invitations taunt me. A symbol of a wedding that will never happen, but also a symbol of clarity, of standing up for myself, of choosing self-respect over compromise when compromise would cost me who I am. I know Evan will try to challenge me, to convince me, maybe even to manipulate me, but this is the line. And for the first time in a long time, I feel the strange, heavy, but freeing weight of certainty. I've started something I can't undo, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. The morning after I canceled everything, I watched Evan wake up to the quiet apartment, oblivious to the storm brewing. I sipped my coffee and rehearsed the words I would say when he asked, which I knew he would. What did you do? When he finally came into the kitchen, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, I handed him the confirmation emails. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief to fury in the space of seconds. You canceled everything? The venue, the florist, the photographer, all of it? His voice was a mix of shock and incredulity. Yes, I said calmly, as though announcing the weather. Every single booking. $11,600 gone. 3 years of your savings spent. His hands trembled slightly as he set his coffee down. Clara, that money. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I did. But it's not about the money, Evan. It's about respect. You humiliated me in front of your friends. You turned my choice into a joke at Megan's engagement party. You made my identity a punchline. He sank into the couch, his head in his hands. You're insane. This is insane. I didn't flinch. I had imagined this moment for weeks. I had imagined his disbelief, his arguments, his attempts to guilt me. I had imagined the silent power of choice. The only insanity here, I said, voice low but firm, is thinking you can mock someone you love and expect them to still say, I do. The next few days were a blur of passive aggression and escalation. Evan went through the usual stages: shock, denial, anger, and finally, desperate attempts at negotiation. He tried the classic guilt tactics, mentioning his parents, reminding me of the deposits, pleading about the wasted money. Clara, think about what you're doing. My parents are flying in from Portland. The dresses are ordered. Everything is set, he pleaded one evening, pacing the kitchen. I stopped him with a simple, unyielding line. I'm thinking about what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is refusing to be your entertainment. He froze, staring at me. I could see the flicker of realization in his eyes. This wasn't going to be a negotiation. I wasn't going to compromise my dignity for a wedding or his ego. Then came the subtle, insidious pressure from the outside. Evan's friends, the ex-girlfriend, even random acquaintances started chiming in. Clara, maybe you're overreacting. Or worse, Evan deserves better. The ex-girlfriend, with her carefully curated Instagram life, subtly painted me as unreasonable. Each comment, each friendly piece of advice, felt like a calculated test. Would I bend under public scrutiny? I didn't. I remembered the quiet moments in the apartment when Evan thought I wasn't watching. When he muttered under his breath about how dramatic I was, how ridiculous this all seemed, I heard every word, and I filed it away. By midweek, Evan's attempts escalated to direct confrontation. What if I compromise? You said you wanted respect. What if I hyphenate, just for appearances? I let out a sharp laugh. For appearances, Evan? That's not respect. That's performative. I don't need hyphenation to feel validated. I need respect. Real respect. He slumped into the couch again, this time more quietly, as if the fight had drained him. So, you're serious? You're really going to throw away everything for pride? I tilted my head, letting the word hang in the air. For dignity, I corrected. There's a difference. The week dragged on with this electric tension, each interaction charged with unspoken threats and grudging realizations. Evan's parents reached out. His sister called. Even the ex-girlfriend got involved indirectly, spreading opinions that weren't hers to spread. But I stood firm. In the quiet moments, I reflected on why I chose this path. I realized that I wasn't rejecting Evan. I was rejecting the idea that love could be conditional on humiliation. That respect could be optional. That compromise could mean erasing yourself for someone else's amusement. And so I waited, not passively, but strategically, watching the ripples of my decision spread outward, knowing that eventually, Evan, and everyone else, would have to confront what true respect really means. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was the one drawing the line. And as I watched the late afternoon light fade across the apartment, I felt a sense of strange, cold relief. The wedding wasn't happening. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had reclaimed a piece of myself. By the middle of the week, the fallout from my decision was in full swing. Evan's family and friends had begun their intervention campaigns, each armed with their own sense of moral righteousness, and I could feel the walls of my apartment closing in with their opinions. First came Evan's mother, Margaret, calling late one evening. Her voice was calm, almost syrupy sweet, but the undertone of disappointment cut sharper than any raised voice. Clara, sweetheart, we love you, truly, she began, carefully, but canceling a wedding over something so trivial? You've upset so many people. Evan is devastated. I took a deep breath, letting the silence hang before answering. Margaret, it's not trivial. You hear yourself. You say you love me, but every word I speak is turned into an argument about your son's feelings. This isn't about money or the venue or even Evan's ego. It's about respect, about being treated as an equal, about not being laughed at in front of everyone. There was a pause on the line. I imagined her bristling behind her floral curtains, trying to reconcile her idea of family harmony with the reality that I wasn't backing down. Then Evan's sister, Ashley, arrived unannounced the next day. Her usual easygoing charm was replaced with a forced seriousness. Clara, I don't know what you're thinking. This isn't just about you. You've thrown away so much money. Everyone's worried. Everyone. I let out a small, wry laugh. Ashley, I haven't thrown away anything that wasn't already compromised. This was never about the money. It was about public humiliation and about being treated like a joke. You, of all people, should understand boundaries. Ashley hesitated, caught between defending her brother and acknowledging the truth. But before she could respond, Brittany, Evan's cousin, barged in with her own brand of emotional logic. Clara, seriously, he loves you. He wants to marry you. Why are you letting a name ruin everything? Isn't love worth a few dollars and a name? I shook my head, feeling the tension tighten in the room. Love isn't about coercion or humiliation, Brittany. You don't get to demand someone erase themselves for a social image. That's not love. That's entitlement. By now, Evan had retreated to the kitchen doorway, watching silently. He looked conflicted, maybe even ashamed, but he wasn't speaking. His silence was a mirror of the private realization he had been avoiding, that our relationship, the bond we had built over 4 years, had been jeopardized not by me, but by his mockery and the pressure of appearances. Then came the ex-girlfriend's subtle social intrusion. She didn't appear in person, but her voice was everywhere, through comments, messages, the whisper of social media. Clara, why are you being so controlling? He's trying to do right by you. Her words were a shadow over every conversation, designed to create doubt, to make me question myself. But I didn't. I had rehearsed this in the quiet of my apartment, in the stillness of nights when only the moon bore witness. I had decided what I would and wouldn't tolerate, and no amount of manipulation would sway me. The peak of this emotional storm arrived Thursday evening. Evan came home with a binder full of solutions he claimed could salvage the wedding and our future. He had scrawled notes, diagrams, even a proposed hyphenation contract. I've thought about it, Clara, he said quietly. Maybe we can compromise. You keep your name legally, but socially we use mine sometimes. Kids get hyphenated names. The wedding could be smaller. We could postpone. I took one look at the pages, the careful penmanship, and laughed bitterly. Evan, this isn't compromise. This is performative negotiation. You're trying to manufacture a solution that looks like progress, but doesn't respect either of us. He sank into the couch, silent, and for a moment I considered the power of that silence. It was the first time in days he seemed to truly hear me. That pause was the space where our relationship could have been rebuilt, but only if he understood that compromise cannot come at the expense of dignity. Meanwhile, his friends, cousins, and even Margaret were all circling, each trying to sway me in different ways. One wanted emotional compliance, another offered financial logic. One friend even suggested that love should be about survival, not principle. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I had already started to see the patterns: entitlement, manipulation, the pressure of appearances, and I refused to participate. By the end of the evening, the living room was littered with papers, half-empty coffee cups, and a tension so thick it could be sliced. I stood in the center, calm, observing the chaos. For the first time, I felt the strange combination of exhaustion and empowerment. The outside world was trying to bend me, but I was unmovable. I knew the next step was coming. The ex-girlfriend wouldn't let this go quietly. She would escalate. She would dramatize. She would attempt one final, desperate intervention to force me into submission. And I had to be ready. Because I had already chosen my line, my dignity, my identity. No one, not Evan, not his family, not the ex-girlfriend, could take that away. Thursday morning, I woke to the sound of a text alert. The ex-girlfriend, Lydia, Evan's former flame, had orchestrated something that was part desperation, part spectacle. A backyard wedding proposal of sorts, complete with a handwritten name agreement contract. I read her words carefully, trying to filter the absurdity from the underlying manipulation. Clara, I've arranged everything. Small ceremony next Saturday in my backyard. You keep your last name legally, but socially use Evan's. Kids get hyphenated names. New budget-friendly wedding. Everyone happy. I stared at the message, incredulous. Not only had Lydia tried to impose a wedding on me, she was framing it as a solution, a compromise engineered to save face for everyone else. Evan had no part in arranging this. He was silent in the background, awkwardly trying not to be drawn into her theatrics. I could see the shame flicker across his face. He didn't approve, but he wasn't stopping it either. I called Lydia, calmly. You realize this isn't about contracts or budgets, right? This is about respect. You can't manufacture love or force someone into submission. Her voice trembled with faux concern. Clara, you're overreacting. He loves you. We're trying to help. Help? By coercion? By forcing me to accept a wedding and terms I never agreed to? I laughed softly, more bitter than amused. No, Lydia. Love doesn't work that way. You're trying to save appearances, not build a family. That's the difference. By now, Evan had left the room. He needed to process, to confront the reality that the woman he loved was not bending under pressure, and that perhaps he had underestimated the cost of public mockery and social expectation. Later that day, I sat in our quiet apartment, reading the contract she sent me. Every clause screamed manipulation. You shall appear compliant. Evan's social standing preserved. Clara maintains only the illusion of choice. I realized that submitting would mean erasing everything I stood for, everything I valued. I refused. I wasn't going to play along with a performance designed to appease social circles. I wouldn't be coerced into marriage under duress. That evening, Lydia arrived with her entourage, her sister, a friend, even a neighbor who had nothing to do with our lives. They tried every tactic: guilt, reasoning, emotional appeals. Clara, don't throw away 4 years over pride, one of them insisted. Pride, I corrected, voice steady. You mean dignity, respect, equality. Not pride, not ego, not appearances. Those are your values, not mine. For hours, I listened, stayed calm, observed. I let them speak, let them try to manipulate. But in the quiet spaces between their words, I felt clarity. I wasn't rejecting Evan. I was rejecting coercion. I was rejecting humiliation disguised as compromise. Finally, Lydia, desperate, raised her voice. If you loved him, you'd do this. You'd take his name, agree to the ceremony, make everyone happy. I smiled, not warmly, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had chosen herself. Lydia, if I loved him, I wouldn't accept a marriage built on mockery and coercion. That's not love. That's convenience. You're confusing appearances with reality, and I refuse to play along. The room went silent. I felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation, every attempt at control. And then, finally, they left. Lydia stormed out, still holding on to the illusion that she had helped. But I knew the truth. The truth was mine to keep. Alone again, I reflected on the difference between wanting a wedding and wanting a life. I wanted the latter. I wanted respect, dignity, and partnership, not an Instagram-perfect ceremony dictated by someone else's agenda. As the sun set, painting the apartment in warm orange light, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. The ex-girlfriend's desperation had revealed the clarity of my own path. I would not be forced, manipulated, or humiliated into love. And in that clarity, I found strength. Because when the spectacle faded, what remained wasn't the backyard wedding, the contract, or the lost deposits. It was me, unwavering, and finally certain that my life would proceed on my own terms. The week after the failed backyard wedding attempt was eerily quiet. The chaos that Lydia and her entourage had tried to orchestrate had dissipated, leaving a calm I hadn't felt in months. But the silence wasn't empty. It was charged with clarity. Evan finally confronted me, alone, in the living room. His expression was raw, a mixture of regret, shame, and realization. Clara, he began, hesitating, as if the right words were buried somewhere behind the weight of his ego and expectations. I didn't understand how much I was making this about appearances, not us. I studied him, measuring his sincerity. You mocked me in front of your friends. You allowed your family and your ex-girlfriend to dictate our decisions. That wasn't about love, Evan. That was about control and convenience, and I won't participate in that. He nodded, swallowing hard. I see that now, and I'm sorry. Truly. I should have listened, respected your identity from the start. I let my pride get in the way. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly. Evan, love is partnership. It's not about bending someone to fit your ideal image. You can't mock me and expect me to comply. That's not marriage. That's performance. He reached for my hand, hesitating. Can we start over? Not the wedding, not the social perfection, but us? Truly, honestly? I squeezed his hand, a small but deliberate gesture. We can start over, Evan, but only if you truly understand what partnership means. Meanwhile, Lydia's dramatic efforts backfired spectacularly. News of her backyard wedding contract circulated among friends and social media circles, but not in the way she intended. People criticized her manipulative overreach, and slowly, her credibility unraveled. The social power she tried to wield over me dissolved under scrutiny. Evan's family also recalibrated. Margaret, Ashley, and even Brittany had to acknowledge that my stand was not stubbornness, but strength. They saw that respect cannot be forced, and that love without it is hollow. Slowly, boundaries were restored, and tension gave way to tentative understanding. The financial side was another reality check. The deposits were gone, the venues canceled, but I realized something crucial. Money is fleeting. Dignity, self-respect, and emotional clarity are priceless. And in losing that money, I gained something infinitely more valuable: certainty, independence, and the ability to demand the love I deserved. Weeks later, Evan and I sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, away from friends, family, and social expectation. We talked, really talked, about what marriage would mean, about names, about identity, about partnership. For the first time, there was no audience, no performative gestures, no pressure, just honesty. I never want to see us mocked, coerced, or manipulated again, I said firmly. I won't let that happen, Evan promised. This time it's us, our way, no one else's. We laughed softly, a private sound of relief and understanding. And for the first time in months, I felt the possibility of a real, honest future. Lydia faded from our lives, blocked and muted, a reminder that some people are more invested in spectacle than substance. But I didn't dwell on that. Instead, I focused on rebuilding trust, on laying foundations stronger than any contract, bigger than any wedding or Instagram perfect moment. A few months later, we planned a small ceremony, simple and meaningful, entirely on our terms. I kept my last name, Clara Foster, and Evan respected it fully. Our children, when they came, would carry hyphenated names, a symbol of mutual respect and shared identity, not coercion. And as I watched the sunset one evening, hand in hand with Evan, I thought of all the chaos, all the manipulation, all the public scrutiny. It had been painful, expensive, infuriating. But it had taught me something invaluable. True love doesn't humiliate you. True love doesn't mock your identity. True love doesn't require contracts or coerced compromise. True love respects you, always. I smiled softly, thinking of the quiet peace that had finally settled over our lives. The invitations were gone. The deposits were lost. The chaos had passed. And yet, for the first time, I felt genuinely, deeply free.